everyone. Thanks for joining our live tutorial on the just released feature workflows. I'm going to give it just 1 or 2 more minutes for a few more people to join. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. This is the agenda we'll cover today. Some housekeeping. Feel free to engage with fellow attendees in the chat. Please use the Q&A section for questions. It's possible to issue your question anonymously if that makes you more comfortable. We're also very curious to hear what workflows would be most valuable to you in your daily work. So we have a poll open where you can jot your ideas and upvote ideas from others. Click the Polly button in the top, looks like it might be under More, there it is, to anytime you have a workflow idea to share. I'm Natalie Patton, VP of Customer Success and Marketing here at Buildings IoT. I'm joined by 2 colleagues from the product department, Ben Bradford and Mike Lowry. We'll be in conversation throughout this session. To start, some context on the Workflows feature. Workflows is part of a strategic progression for our product. The product started with Insights, which is our name for fault detection and diagnostics. We've incrementally added more user-focused value as we've built it out over the past 7 years. Work requests represent further enhancement, delivering lightweight CMMS capability built directly into the front end. And just before workflows, we released enhanced dashboard functionality with an ever-expanding library of data tiles or widgets for deep user-generated analysis and a sharing feature that enables users to create and distribute dashboards with other users. It's important that we have a shared understanding of the information that is present in our insights. What's different about our analytics is the level of detail that's provided. This consists of 4 elements: the issue, the rule, the recommendation, and the backup. In the issue statement, we tell you the problem. In the rule detail, we tell you what we measured in order to know that the issue is in fact a problem. The recommendation is a suggested first course of action, and the backup is delivered in a chart that automatically loads all of the data points that we've used in the analytic algorithm to display the historical values that led to the AI/ML determination. Reports further enable operators to keep an eye on persistent issues, progress toward optimization goals, or energy reduction efforts. And a couple years ago, we introduced work requests to turn insights into action. This is a lightweight CMMS functionality that enables users to put the information from the insight into a work request that someone can then go work on. And bringing us nearly to the present, we have our improved dashboarding and expansive widget library that lets users configure roll-up views of all integrated data in whatever way makes sense for the information they need to do their jobs. With that background, I wanted to ask Ben a few questions about the development process and philosophy that went into the Workflows feature. So Ben, how did Workflows make it onto the roadmap?
Well, Natalie, it started off as an idea that was submitted to customer success team. The original concept that we had was called Daily Digest. We use some internal software called AHA, which collects and tracks ideas and all of the feature requests that come in, which is what you're seeing here on the screen. This was the original seed of the idea that came from a customer. We really loved, on the product team, we really loved the concept and wanted to explore the problem a little bit more before we put it onto the roadmap.
And what does the road mapping aspect look like?
Well, with most roadmaps, you always have to balance the good ideas versus the resources. They never seem to be in alignment. But with when we get new ideas from customers, we tend to circle these with a big red pen and say, "Hey, team, we need to try to fit this into the development cycle." Um, what that does is it kicks off some discovery. We start talking to customers, more customers than the person who had just had submitted it. We review their feedback. We do some internal discussions, and then eventually we place it on the roadmap as a feature that we want to try to tackle in the. Usually we're a quarter or a couple quarters ahead of things. So for this one that we're talking about today, we knew we had a winner because it solved a core problem that we were seeing from a lot of our customers who were submitting some ideas. And then we just needed to try to figure out how we could, fit it into their day-to-day workflow to make it useful.
And once you decide to put an effort on the roadmap, do developers begin coding?
I wish, but no. Unfortunately, what we do first is we've got to go through more customer interviews to better understand the problem. No matter if the idea is coming from a customer or even our CEO, we need to have a deep understanding of the problem before we start designing a solution. Everybody loves to get right into solutioning things out, but I think one of our roles as a product team is to really try to dig deep. And one of the techniques that we use is asking the question why at least 5 times so we can get down to the root of the problem. I don't recommend this with your teenagers, but it does work really well in a product role, especially when you're working with some customers and some coworkers. But once we've kind of done our diagnosis, we start to get into the prototyping stage of the process, which can be really fun. And the prototype phase is what allows us to take all of the information that we've sketched out and we can kind of start to put it into some sort of visuals like what you're seeing here. Workflows was just originally going to be a daily digest notification, like I mentioned, and that's kind of what the design was here. And as we started looking at this on the whiteboard and talking about it with some customers and talking about it with each other, we felt like there was a better solution that could address many other use cases than just a notification.
Okay, so you go through several rounds of prototyping, and how do you know when you've landed on the one you want to build?
Well, building software is an iterative process. It never really ends at all. I describe it as it's like fashion. It just evolves. So the key difference that we're doing here though is that we have to land on something that helps a customer continually solve a business problem in their day-to-day. Once you hear some positive feedback from customers and it's regular about when you're showing your prototype out, and this is like usually several rounds of interviews, that's when you're starting to find some sort of solution, and it's starting to look like we could think about a release.
And how do you know when something is ready for release?
Yeah, this is another area that's very unscientific. When something new is ready for release, it's more of a feel thing versus meeting some sort of specific KPI or metric. We're we internally are the first users of any new feature, and so we're testing it thoroughly. We're making sure that we're finding it internally useful and exciting. We show a few people here and there what we're doing, and we really once we really like it, um and if we feel like it meets our needs, we start to move towards release. I think it's important to note that we're a cloud-based software, so we're constantly iterating on all the new features. And so if we miss the mark on the very first release, uh, you'll start to see some updates very quickly. This next slide here is a snap of the current feature that Mike is going to demo.
Thanks, Ben. That was a great overview of Buildings IoT's development process and how we got to this point with the workflows feature. So as Ben said, we're going to pass it over to Mike to take us through the live tutorial in OnPoint.
Thanks, Natalie. I'm going to share my screen. So before we talk a little bit more in depth about the workflows, sorry, I'm going to just put a bit of context to where we are and why you might want to use the workflows. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about using our product. And as Natalie mentioned, we have lots of insights, our FDD kind of solution. And say, for example, I'm in our product and we're using automated demand management. And I'm like, why is this being disqualified? Well, I can go to that piece of equipment. I can look at the insights and I can find out that basically things like there's no cooling command and low discharge air temperature, status doesn't equal command is telling me there's a problem. And but I've interrogated it. I've come to the system. I've looked at the system. I've found what I want to do. Now I'm going to spend some time looking at the insights and do something with it. Another scenario could be that I'm, really interested in comfort. And so I'm looking at all my buildings and my systems. I'm checking on the comfort. And, this conference room looks really hot. And maybe it's just there's a lot of hot air and, there's a lot of executives shouting at each other. And so the room's got too warm. Or maybe there's something wrong. Well, maybe that room's really important. Maybe that's where you have all your client meetings and you want that to go really well. So I'm going to start investigating the room and I'm going to look at this piece of equipment. And again, I've come into the system, I've looked at the equipment, I'm going to look at the insight on that piece of equipment, and it says there's been no change in that temperature sensor, and I can start to interrogate that sensor and find out what's wrong. And as I've kind of said, all of these steps are very much you coming into the system and checking for things and looking at things and trying to work out what's wrong. And let's say you fix that conference room. But how do you know that that conference room, is still okay? How do you know that that fault doesn't come back? You'd have to come back and check, and look again and again. And so what we've tried to do with workflows is for things that are really important to you, that you can get the system to send that information to you every morning so that you can target what you're looking for as opposed to scanning the whole system. I mean, imagine here if you had to look for across a large portfolio of buildings, and you found the building you wanted and then clicked into it, there's a lot of steps. And so, which is great. We want people using our product. We don't want people to be outside the product all the time, but sometimes we just want to save you time as well. So that's where workflows come in. So I'm going to load some workflows up that I've currently had. I can see what's going on in these workflows. So as you log them in, you can see that this one's for comfort issues in the Northeast section. I can see the rules, what buildings it affects at a glance. I can open them up and edit them if I want, but I can just see them at a glance rather than having to scroll through lots of information to find out what's going on. The other thing we can do is sometimes, you've got this piece of equipment that's a bit of a pain and you want to check on it, but after a while you don't want to get any messages again. You've sorted the problems. Well, you can just turn the workflow off. You'll no longer get messages. When you decide to have it up again, just click the status. The system will start running and you'll get more, you'll get the information. So let's get to it. Let's create a workflow. So the first thing I want to be able to do is select which building I'm interested in. And this automatically brings up all the buildings that are visible to you. So if example, Bob only looked after Mid-Atlantic and Betty only looked after the Northeast, the only sections they would see in this would be Mid-Atlantic or Northeast. Because I'm a kind of super user, I get to see everything. And so I'm going to come to the building I want to find. I'm going to say that we're going to look at the city center today. And I'm going to move on to the next steps. Now, if you kind of remember back to that picture that Ben was showing earlier, it was kind of horizontal. We've iterated through to come up to this kind of flow chart. So you can see each step and all the rules on the way. So I come to the rules. We have lots of rules that help you find out what's wrong with your equipment. So you can scroll down to find the rule that you want, or if you kind of, I know it's about temperature. So I can start to just type temp, and then the system will tell you okay, I'm going to worry about the high space temperature, right? And I'm going to say that's really, we've got a high discharge air temperature as well. So I'm going to look after those. That's what I'm interested in. And the next thing we're going to do is, do I really want a low, a low priority, or do I really care mainly about some things that I should be focusing on right now? Once you've got rid of all the urgent and high, preventative maintenance tasks, maybe you want to look at the low and medium, but for now, I'm just interested in high. And then the next thing might be, do I want to specifically look for a piece of equipment? Remember what I said before, you had that one piece of equipment that's serving some offices. You're like, actually, I want to take note of that. Or maybe I'm just interested in fan coil units. So, am I getting a high space temperature? Am I getting a high discharge temperature? Maybe not from my fan coils. Maybe I want to check it from my, my VAVs. So, or I could pick multiple pieces of equipment, and then I can decide whether I want to hide everything that belongs to a VAV and show all the other equipment, or just show things that only belong to VAVs. And in this case, we're going to only have insights that show for VAVs. And I'm going to move on. So now, when do I want that report? And that's important. As Ben said, we had a daily one. Now we've got weekly. So you could look at what's happened over a week, or if something's more critical for you, you could look at something what's happened that day. So the previous day. So I get into the office pretty early, and I want to make sure that meeting room is good. So I'm going to set that to be 6:30 in the morning. The other thing we do is we tell you the time zones of the buildings you've selected. So that makes sure that you're not sending somebody a report at 3 a.m. Pacific when you meant 6 a.m. Eastern. And so that helps you decide what time zone you want to send the report in. When do you want it? When would you like it to start? Well, today's a good time, no time like the present. And then this is kind of one of our most important features. There's no point in having this great workflow if you have to come into the product to find out what's going on. It's kind of defeated the purpose. So you can do two things. You can select internal recipients. So that's people who are OnPoint and Jetstream users, or you could select external recipients, people who don't use our products, but maybe you've never heard of our products, but they've heard of you. So if you need to send it to a facilities manager that you're doing some maintenance analysis for, energy management analysis, you could send them to them rather than going to you, then you emailing them. You can put them internal and external. So I'm going to find me. I'm going to send that to me. And then I'm going to send this to Bob the builder, because Bob needs to help me out. So it's going to go to an internal and external recipient. And then the last step in the journey is, what do you want to call this report? And so this is the name of the workflow, but it's also the name of the email. So if I called it Mike's super special report, maybe that's not very helpful to Bob, right? But if I said, conf room temp issues, then, I know what it means, and so does Bob. So we'll save that and finish it. And then that's going to start running. And you can see that there's conf room temp issues. I can open it back up if I want to. I can go and, you know what, I want to do another building. I want to add a different rule. I can just click on it. I'm going to add a different rule and say, well, that's too hot. Let's say we'll do that. I'm just going to add another rule. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this, whether it's a good rule or a bad rule. It's just for the demo. So now I've got that. Well, what does it look like? Well, in true cookery show fashion, here's one I prepared earlier. So you can see the report, fan on 24/7, fan on 24/7. It's come into the system. You can see our branding. You can see where it's from. And most importantly, you can also unsubscribe. So if you're like, why am I getting this? Or, oh yeah, I forgot to turn it off. Well, you can just click unsubscribe. It'll take us to our unsubscribe page. And one click of the button and you're no longer on that report. The system automatically knows if If there's no recipients, it will automatically turn the workflow off so that it's not trying to run and waste cycles by trying to work out what's going on. But the important part of this is it's now told you something. Maybe you want to do something about it. This fan's been on for 24 hours. Well, I'm going to go and have a look. So clicking the link brings you back in to the product where you can do some more detailed analysis. You could start to do some more charting. You maybe want to select some other points, whether there's set points and things like that, and add those to your chart so that you can do more investigation about what's going on. The final thing I want to talk about before I close is, if you remember, I showed you this. Well, if you've sent it to, in my case, Bob hasn't heard of OnPoint. Bob doesn't even know who we are. So because he's working, you're doing work for Bob. Well, what we've enabled here is a system that you can override this branding and change it to be your logo, your color scheme, text, and your company address. So when you're sending these to essentially our customer's customer, they look like they're coming from you. So they don't think it's spam. They don't think it's like some sort of weird phishing scheme that, the team at BIoT are trying to hook them into the product, right? It's coming from you. And this gets changed for every single one of them at your level. So as for your company, it will get changed. So every email will be branded. You don't have to keep selecting it each time. I think that's my initial whistle stop tour. I'm going to pull that to a close, and then I'll hand it back to Natalie.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We're happy to pull back up the demo site if there's specific questions that that backdrop would be useful for. Some additional context, the workflows right now, as you saw, are tied to the insights. So they're a way to pull users in, focusing on specific insights or problems within the building. The workflows concept is applicable to other aspects of not only the product, but what users are trying to do within the product. So that's what we mean by other workflow ideas. So if you have any that are coming to mind, that we've got the analytics or the fault detection and diagnostics that we've now triggered workflows on. If there are others that you think would be useful, like when a work request is activated or when a room is too hot, or that kind of thing, those are the next round of iteration that we will be doing to continue building on the foundation that we've got here today. So if you have other ideas, feel free to put them into the Polly section there. We are at the Q&A section as well, so feel free to share your questions in the Q&A, and we can dive in deeper to any parts of the system or the backstory that you would find interesting. So we'll give people a minute or so here to think on what we've discussed and see if any questions come up. It is possible to, oh, here we go. Okay, I didn't know. So we've got one about the branding that Mike was just talking about. So does the branding get set at the account level, or is it specific to each workflow for all users? So is it something that users need to remember to set every single time, or can it be established at the account level?
Yeah, it's set at the account level so that you don't have to keep remembering it every time.
Okay, great.
And just to be really kind of detailed on that, it's also only certain levels of rights management get to change that branding. So it's certain admin levels get to do it, rather than just anybody can go in and add whatever image they fancy.
That makes sense. Are there any GDPR concerns with the email communications?
Yeah, that's a good thing to ask. And so there's a couple of things to take into account here. Number one is that if you're an on-point user, then you've already agreed to us contacting you as part of the work and part of using our product, and therefore you've kind of agreed to that GDPR ruling. If they're your customer's customer, at the bottom of the emails that we send out, one is the immediate unsubscribe link. Number two is a link to our privacy policy so that people can see how we use that information, what it's being used for. And finally, there's a link to our customer success team where if you have a complaint, you can get straight away to our information manager and talk about that problem.
And this one is really interesting and might take a few of us to respond to. The question is, are the rules built separately? For example, you showed several that are related to things that are being too hot or too cold. Are those within workflows or separate?
Yeah. So the rules that we show there are for the specific FTD rules out of SkySpark that does our analytics. And so they're designed by our building engineers, and we have a generic, I would say, a generic base set of rules that apply to pretty much every building. And then there's specific tooling for, individual needs. Say in some areas, you have to keep this fan on 24/7 because of, I don't know, air movement rules. Maybe you're in a hospital or something like that. And so that might get turned off because you just don't want to keep getting told something you already know that's not important to you because it has to be like that. But how our system works is that it goes to each of the buildings that you've selected and says, tell me what rules you have, and then it basically pulls them together and gives you a single set of data. So there's no repetition. So if one building has a very specific rule, you'll find it even if you've selected many buildings.
Yeah, another thing that's interesting about our rules and how they get applied to the data that's integrated within the system is that the rules library itself is tied to the data model. So as soon as the data is connected to and modeled against our open source data model, then the rules are applied. So as we saw, there was a large portfolio of several different buildings, which equates to all kinds of different control systems, all kinds of different disparate systems, be that HVAC, lighting, sensors. So the rules library gets applied across the normalized data set so that we can look at the same rules across multiple different buildings and all kinds of different subsystems that then we can pick from the library that's established and apply it to all of the different equipment. So that's how we're able to, in that workflows section, say, this is your total universe of analytics rules, and here's all of the equipment. You get to pick which ones are relevant to you right now for this notification to these specific users. Another interesting and complex one here is around automated scheduled troubleshooting. So the question is there any automated or scheduled troubleshooting to detect system malfunction? And if the person who asked that question, if I've butchered kind of the detail there, feel free to chime in the conversation. But I think what they're asking about here is scheduled maintenance or scheduled notification that triggers based on a specific malfunction. So could we accommodate that in a workflow?
Yeah, we don't really have that at the moment. I mean, this is not preventative maintenance workflows, it's predictive maintenance. So we wouldn't be telling you to, this is piece of equipment's due its yearly check or its 6-month check or whatever. We don't have any of that. This is more that we're looking at all of the points coming in. We're looking at the data on those points, matching it against rule patterns and deciding that something's wrong. So like I said, that example of fan commanded on 24/7, that could be a problem. Fans don't normally run like that, especially if you've got occupancy sensors and things like that. So that's what the rules are more for, is spotting problems that are coming up. So, like, why is that fan on all the time? You're going to start getting excess wear on the fan. You're using more energy than you should. Maybe the room's too cold all the time, so you're getting more calls, that sort of thing.
One way, if users are focused on a particular malfunction that is represented from the rules library, that can be created as a workflow that says, tell me as soon as this rule is triggered across my portfolio. For example, if there is a temperature threshold that you cannot go above, or a piece of equipment that cannot experience some kind of operational condition, you can use the workflows to be automatically notified on a specific schedule of that malfunction. And if there's a follow-up question to that, please put it in and we'll dive in. There is a follow-up question on the insights and the rules and the workflows that we were talking about just a minute ago. So the follow-up question is, so the insights you can choose in the workflow are actually the rules, or insights are families of rules. So the question is, those insights that show up, are they the rules themselves, or are they specific categories of grouped rules?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just going back to the screen is probably the easiest way to kind of show that. So if I just clear this off, I'll kind of show you. So if you see here, this section is all about comfort, and then this section's all about energy. And there's a lot of energy, sort of general rules, indoor air quality rules, rules for meters, building optimization rules. You've got, like I say, just all of those different rules. They're the groupings. So if you were interested in just IAQ, you could literally just click all of the IAQ sensors, and that will tell you the rules pertaining to that like kind of group, right? Or if you just wanted an individual one.
Yeah, so the grouping that you see there are what we call classes in the rest of the system. And then each of the selectable options is a rule in and of itself, which is an algorithm that looks at a group of points and their output throughout time.
Yeah,
so
the
it's
behavior
kind
of those points over a period of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Some enhancement questions and kind of roadmap conversation here. Are there any plans to add send test email or test email functionality to preview the workflow email at any point in the process?
Yep.
And is there any plan to add an option to omit buildings without insights, so you don't have to look through those in the list?
Yep. So absolutely. I'll answer the last one first because it's first in my head. So the system automatically knows when buildings don't have insights. So if I show my screen again and I come back to this little rule we did, if I look at a building, you see here, none of this building doesn't have insights, so you can't select it, right? So that the system automatically kind of says, hey, no, you just can't. And what was the first part of the question? I can't keep two things in my head at once.
Sorry. Send a test email.
Yeah, so we don't have a send test email functionality, but what I would recommend is, you don't want the first time Bob gets the email to be some sort of mess of 58,000 insights that you didn't want. So I would just recommend doing that. saving it, send it to yourself. And what the system does, and I think this is, I didn't really go into it because it wasn't necessary for the demo, but the first time you select it, it will run immediately because so if I said start today and run at 6:30 a.m., 6:30 a.m. is already passed. The system's like, oh, you needed to have this message. I haven't sent it. So you will get it immediately. So you'll get a copy of it. It'll come through. You're like, yeah, I need to make a couple of tweaks. Just change the time again. The system will be like, oh, you haven't received that. And until you're happy with it. And once you're happy, leave it and it'll set it to the time period you want and it'll come through.
Mm. That's interesting. So that's almost like it's an automated preview, and users can send it to themselves.
Exactly.
First
Just
and
send
confirm.
it to yourself.
Great. Another question on priority. So how is priority assigned, and how does the filtering work on the workflow portion? I can address the priority part if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
So the priority is established on the rule, but it is an active calculation. So an analytic that's triggered at one point in time might come in as a low priority based on its severity within that equipment itself, its impact on the operation of that equipment. But the priority calculates based on, in part, on the duration that the issue has persisted. So when that issue is first identified, it's a low priority. But if it's not addressed, it may the impact may compound over time. And so in 3 days, if it has still been happening for that total duration of 3 days, then the priority is going to bump up. So there's several factors that go into the calculation. Duration is one. It's that the points that are associated with the one rule's relationship to other points are also a factor, as well as kind of where that equipment sits within the larger system relationships as well. And so that priority filter exists on the insights themselves, and we pulled it into the workflow functionality so it could be used as a way to determine the importance of the set of rules that you're triggering on.
Yeah, right. And the other, to answer the other half of the question, I'm going to share my screen again. I want you to think about the job kind of working like this. Imagine this is the insights for this building. What I did in the workflow was said, really, I'm saying like this, show me anything where it says fan commanded. Oh, I can't type, right? So it's gone like that, so if I change that to 24/7 just to make it easier. So it's like, show me that. And so what the job does is look at the list of everything and say, does anything match that? Yes, it does. Let people know. So it's not different to what we've got in the product. It's just taking that product and going, given the criteria that somebody put in, does it show? I only want to see low priority items. Why you do that, I don't know. But so it's just applying the filters in the background and then deciding what to send you. Over the time period of, I want it today, or in this case, it would be yesterday for the daily digest. So show me what happened yesterday. Oh, look, there's a high one. So that's what I mean about how the job works. It just really applies these filters and then tells you what's going on.
And we have users who do organize their workflow around the priority. So they say, this month we are tackling all of the high priority issues. And so we can create a workflow using that as a filter for the main insights that are relevant to them. And then they can go about using the daily or weekly email to basically check off their work. And then by the end of that month, when they don't have any more high priority issues coming through on that email, they can compare it to the first one that came through and say, look all that we've accomplished. And users are doing that to show their service value up the chain. A question on the names. If you have several of these workflows, where does the name come through on the email? And I believe it's in the subject line.
It's in the subject line of the email, yeah, and then on the banner in the kind of text message, in the kind of body of the email. So that's why I said if I as I said in the demo, if I called it Mike's super special report, people you're like, why have you got an email called that? So think when you're thinking about that name, it's important to help people understand what they're receiving.
Mm-hmm. We do have a couple more questions, but there's also a workflow idea in the poll that I wanted to highlight, and we can kind of chat about for a minute. So the idea is a workflow around what equipment is offline in my building. The idea is that this could be useful to identify equipment with communication issues or where a device is down. Is that something you guys think would be useful? Is that something we could accomplish today?
Not today, no. But certainly it's useful. Yeah, it's on our radar to look at, and I want to be really clear here, not about building alarms, but building a system that you're a little bit more clever around points. So if there's some information about a certain point, in this case, this is a good one, offline, the communication status is offline. That's something we're definitely looking into as a future step in the kind of workflows. And in that situation, we might also include, rather than just an email messaging, we might also include SMS messaging because the time period will be different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that actually touches on two other questions that we have. One was, do people have, or is email the only way to receive a notification? And you said, yeah, but we're looking at SMS as an option. And then another interesting one that you sort of touched on there is around alarms. And the question is, what's the difference between all of this and an alarm console or alarming functionality?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think one of the key differences is that what this isn't doing is going, alarm goes on, send you a message, alarm goes off, send nothing, alarm goes on, send you, you're not getting messages all the time, right? It's not about alarming. What it's about is looking at the behavior of your equipment over the time period you've selected to identify problem behaviors. So, I think that's really the biggest difference with our insights. They're not alarms, they're predictive maintenance steps. And, we're not trying to tell you that the battery's flat on something, go and change it, or this damper's stuck, go and change it, where the damper continually sticks, right? Go and do something about it. If you've got an alarm where something's going in and out and in and out all day, what do you eventually do? Silence that alarm because it becomes annoying. And so what we're trying to do with this is actually project problems that you're going to face in the future because of the behavior of your equipment.
Yeah, just a couple more things to underscore there. Alarms are point in time readings, whereas analytics are based on historical value. So our analytics are rerunning based on 3 hours of data collected. So we're going in and we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, this is happening right now. It's not a problem yet. Let's keep an eye on it. And then if it's happening in 3 hours or 12 hours or 24 hours, the thresholds change based on the different rule, but there's that immediate kind of siphoning through of problems. So it's not just like problem triggered, problem resolved, problem triggered, problem resolved. So that cuts down the nuisance right away. And then the workflow again is just a way to pull people into the analytic process, which the analytics also take into account how a group of data points are impacting the operation of other parts of the equipment or the related system downstream or upstream. So if something is turning off and on all day long, that may or may not be a problem in and of itself, but it also may be impacting something that's bigger and more important. So through the data model and the algorithms, we're able to understand how issues are impacting each other and really create that more helpful detailed statement and first course of resolution based on that analysis as well. That is all of the questions that we've got in the chat. So I think we can wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for your time, for exploring the workflows feature with us, and for sharing your questions. Get in touch with any of us if you have other ideas or questions or want a further deep dive here after this. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.